My name is Josephine, 34 years old. For Christmas, my parents gifted my 9-year-old a brand new iPhone. She lit up with pure joy, the kind that makes your chest ache because it's so innocent and unfiltered. She tore the wrapping paper off before anyone could stop her, bouncing on her heels, already thanking them a dozen times. For a split second, I thought maybe I'd been wrong about them. Maybe time really had softened the edges. Maybe this year was different. Then she turned it on. The Apple logo glowed, the screen shifted, and her smile faded just slightly. She frowned, tilted her head, and looked up at me with a confusion that didn't belong on a child's face. "Mama, who's that?" I walked over, still calm, still not understanding what I was about to see. I assumed maybe they'd set a family photo as the wallpaper or taken a selfie earlier, but the moment I looked at the screen, my body went cold. It was Michael, her father, a clean, sharp photo of him, smiling straight at the camera, set as the home screen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Harper had never seen his face. Not once. I never showed her a picture. I never told her he was dead. He died in a car crash 3 weeks before she was born, and for 9 years I carried that truth alone, telling her he was working overseas, telling myself I would explain everything when she was old enough to understand without it shattering her. I thought I still had time. I didn't say a word. The room changed immediately. My mom went quiet in a way that felt deliberate. My dad suddenly became very interested in the edge of the tablecloth, rubbing it between his fingers like it might save him. My sister's husband, Dan, let out this awkward laugh, the kind people make when they know something's wrong but hope it'll pass if they don't acknowledge it. Harper looked at me again, still holding the phone, waiting. I told her we needed to go. Right then. No discussion, no explanations, no raised voices. I packed our things, said a quiet goodbye that barely counted as one, and walked out before anyone could stop me. I drove home on autopilot, my hands steady on the wheel, even though my thoughts were anything but. I knew exactly what they were doing. That photo wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a setting error or a misunderstanding. It was a message, a punishment for keeping Harper at a distance, for setting boundaries, for leaving the family orbit and building a life and a business without them. They used my daughter to send it. 2 hours later, my phone exploded. Dan was screaming over speakerphone, accusing me of being dramatic, of ruining Christmas over a wallpaper photo. My dad was begging me not to make it a bigger deal than it was, repeating my name like if he said it enough times, I'd calm down and fall back into line. My mom didn't say a word, not one. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I didn't respond. I opened my laptop and started cutting them out completely. By morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, Harper still asleep in her room, the house quiet and clear. I didn't cry, I didn't pace, or call anyone to vent. I just started clicking. First, I revoked access to the family credit card, the one my parents used for unexpected expenses. Funny how their definition of unexpected always turned into luxury face creams, restaurant bills, and furniture upgrades. I'd been letting it slide for over a year, hoping they'd grow into better grandparents. That hope died with the glow of that phone screen. I closed the account entirely. Then I moved on to the shared savings. It had started years ago, back when I still believed we were one big family. After Michael died, I never closed it. I transferred every penny into 2 new private accounts, one in my name and one in Harper's. Around 10 that morning, my dad called 3 times. I ignored him. Then he texted about being at the pharmacy, how the card wasn't working, asking if I could check it when I had a moment. I didn't reply. The silence from my mom was louder than any call. She knew what she did. She knew exactly why Harper asked that question. She wanted that door opened. So I kept going. I called my accountant and removed my parents from every business notification. They were never partners, just names hovering in the background because I'd allowed it. I told my accountant to prepare the paperwork for a clean split. They thought they still had a seat at my table. They didn't. I made Harper pancakes and told her a version of the truth. Not everything. Just that her dad wasn't coming back. That he'd been gone for a long time. She nodded, quiet, processing in her own way. I didn't push her. That night, Dan showed up at my door. He said I was heartless. Said I'd cut off their financial safety net like it meant nothing. I asked him one question. Did he know? He hesitated, then admitted my mom had shown him the phone days before Christmas and laughed, calling it poetic. That word again, poetic. After he left, I stared at the last unopened gift under the tree. It was mine, wrapped in gold paper, my name written in perfect cursive, a tag that read, "We're still proud of you." I hadn't touched it yet, but I knew whatever was inside wasn't love. And I was right. I waited until Harper was asleep before I touched the gift they'd left for me. It had been sitting under the tree all day, wrapped in gold foil paper, my name written in my mother's careful cursive like nothing had changed. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the living room floor and opened it slowly, the way you do when you already know something inside might hurt. It was a frame. At first, I didn't recognize the photo. It looked too clean, too polished, like something you'd order from a professional print shop. Then it hit me all at once. It was me, 7 months pregnant, standing beside Michael, both of us smiling. The photo had been taken at my baby shower, one of the last pictures we ever took together. I never shared it. I never posted it. I never gave a copy to my parents. They must have found it years ago on Michael's old hard drive, back when I still trusted them with anything that mattered. Taped to the back of the frame was a folded piece of paper. My mother's handwriting. For Harper. For when she's ready to know who her father really was, maybe by then you'll be ready to tell the truth too. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just a sentence heavy enough to crush anything it touched. The iPhone wasn't a mistake. It wasn't even the main event. It was the opening act. The wallpaper, then the framed photo, then the note. A sequence. Planned. Timed. They wanted Harper to see Michael's face before I was ready. They wanted her to ask questions I wasn't prepared to answer. They wanted to paint me as a liar in my own daughter's eyes and themselves as the keepers of the real story. They didn't care what it did to her. I didn't rip the note. I didn't throw the frame across the room. I left everything exactly as it was. The next morning, I slid it all into a paper bag, drove across town, and set it down on their front porch. No knock, no text, no warning. I was done playing their game. By the time I got home, I had already opened a shared folder with my lawyer. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was about control, ownership, and the way they'd been inserting themselves into my life for years without my permission. When I started my business 5 years ago, I was barely functioning. Michael had been gone less than a year. I was pregnant, grieving, and terrified. My parents loaned me some money to get a tiny online shop off the ground. I paid it back 3 years ago, every cent. But the way they told the story, you'd think they bankrolled my entire life. They introduced me at parties as our daughter who runs the family business. Every time I swallowed it, because fighting felt exhausting. Now I understood. They weren't supporting me. They were claiming me. So I removed them officially. I called the bank and revoked every shared access point. I sent my accountant updated ownership documents and terminated any remaining advisory roles. Then I went further. I rewrote the company bio, stripped out every line about family roots or inspiration, and replaced it with the truth. Built by a single mother with grief, grit, and a daughter to protect. That afternoon, my uncle called, my mom's brother. He said he'd heard there was trouble after Christmas and maybe things had gotten out of hand. He told me not to burn bridges I might need later. When he finished, he said, "They're still your parents, Josephine." That sentence again, like blood erased everything else. 3 days after Christmas, an email came in from my business bank's fraud department. Someone had tried to access my company account from an unrecognized device, multiple failed logins, an attempted password reset. The IP address traced back to my parents' house. Not even subtle. Either they thought they still had a right to my life, or they never believed I'd stop them. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and asked him to add it to the file. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. 4 pages. Typed, cold, not an apology, a list. Every favor they'd ever done for me, dated and assigned a dollar value. College help, babysitting, furniture, a $1,200 check from when I was 6 months pregnant and couldn't afford a car repair. At the end, they wrote that given my company's success, they believed a 15% equity share was fair. They were invoicing me for being their daughter. I folded the letter and placed it with the bank alert. Harper was back at school by then, focused on her New Year's resolution to read 1 book a week. She asked once more about the phone, then let it go. I followed her lead, one truth at a time. That night, a call came from my cousin Claire. Her voice shook when she said it. Grandma knew. She'd heard bits and pieces and confronted my parents. The conversation went badly. badly enough that Grandma told them if they didn't apologize to me publicly and sincerely, she'd cut them off from the estate. I didn't expect that. Grandma never chose sides, but something about what they did to Harper crossed a line even she couldn't ignore. 2 days later, my mom showed up at my door with a plastic container in her hands, like this was a normal visit. She asked if we could talk. I asked her one question. Was it your idea to put Michael's photo on Harper's phone? She looked down, then back up. You can't keep her in the dark forever, Josephine. I closed the door. That night, Claire called again, shaken. She said she overheard my parents talking about contacting Michael's family. His parents. People I hadn't spoken to in years. If they stirred that pot now, it could get ugly, emotionally and legally. I didn't sleep. I knew then this wasn't over. They still thought they had one more card to play. And they were right. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of what they might do next, but because I finally understood the pattern. Every time I drew a boundary, they treated it like a challenge. Every time I stayed quiet, they filled the silence with their own version of the story. They didn't see me as a separate person. They saw me as something they had invested in, something that should still answer to them. The next morning, I sat at my desk and stared at the wall for a long time before opening my laptop. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I felt focused, like everything that had been foggy for years had snapped into place all at once. I opened the folder my lawyer had shared and began organizing the paper trail, the bank alert, the certified letter, the timeline of financial ties I'd already severed. This wasn't about retaliation. This was about documentation. When my parents loaned me money years ago, I was barely surviving. Michael had been gone less than a year. I was pregnant, grieving, and terrified of failing before I even started. They offered help, and I accepted it with gratitude. I paid every cent back. I kept the receipts. I remembered the relief of mailing that final payment and thinking it was over. But it hadn't been over for them. They kept that moment alive, polished it, retold it until it became proof that I belonged to them. I saw it clearly now in the way they talked about my company, the way my father would say things like, "We're doing well this quarter," or ask why our numbers dipped one month. The way my mother introduced me as if my work were an extension of their generosity instead of my resilience. I'd let it slide because it was easier than fighting, because grief makes you tired in a way people don't understand. That afternoon, I called my lawyer and told him I wanted to move faster. He didn't sound surprised. He asked if there had been any further contact. I told him about the attempted login, the letter demanding equity, and the threat to involve Michael's family. There was a pause on the line. Then he said we should prepare for escalation. I agreed. I'd already accepted that this wasn't going to end quietly. When I picked Harper up from school, she was chatty, excited about a book she'd finished and a spelling test she thought she'd aced. I listened, smiled, nodded, and felt a steady resolve settle deeper in my chest. Whatever else happened, I would not let her become collateral damage again. Not for their pride, not for their need to control a story that wasn't theirs to tell. That evening, Dan called. I didn't answer. He texted instead, something about wanting to clear the air and reminding me that family should handle things internally. I deleted it without responding. The word internally had become code for quietly, for letting them keep their leverage while I swallowed the damage. The next call came from my dad. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail. His tone was measured, almost professional. He said we needed to talk about the business, about misunderstandings, about things that had gotten out of hand. He said he didn't want lawyers involved. That part almost made me smile. People who say that usually know they've crossed into territory where they don't get to set the rules anymore. I didn't call him back. Instead, I did something I should have done years earlier. I reviewed every document connected to Michael's estate, not just the summaries, not just the final numbers, but the original filings, the signatures, the dates. I remembered a comment my accountant had made once, casually, about how quickly the insurance payout had been processed. At the time, I'd been grateful. I needed the stability. I didn't ask questions because asking felt like reopening a wound I could barely keep closed. Now I asked. There it was, buried in the paperwork, like a footnote no one expected me to read. A Keogh signature that didn't need to be there, my father's name. His involvement had been framed as help, as support during a difficult time. But help doesn't insert itself into ownership. Help doesn't linger for years as implied authority. They hadn't just helped me survive. They had positioned themselves inside my life like permanent fixtures. The realization didn't break me, it steadied me. Later that night, Harper asked if we could plan something fun for spring break. She said she wanted to see geysers and animals and big open spaces. Yellowstone, she said, like it was already decided. I told her we could. I told her we would make it happen. And I meant it in a way I hadn't meant promises in a long time. When I went to bed, my phone buzzed once more. An unknown number, one sentence. You're going to regret this when she finds out what you're hiding. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I already knew what they were threatening. I just didn't know yet how far I was willing to go to stop them. But I was about to find out. I stared at that message for a long time, not because it scared me, but because it confirmed something I'd been trying not to admit. They still believed they were holding something over me, something powerful enough to force me back into silence. You'll regret this when she finds out what you're hiding. There were only two things that could mean. One was obvious, the lie I'd told to protect Harper, the story about her father working overseas. But they'd already used that. They played it on Christmas morning with the phone, the wallpaper, the framed photo, the note taped neatly on the back. They thought that was the moment that would break me. This was something else. I went to the back of my closet and pulled out the small fireproof box I hadn't opened in years. The lock clicked open with a sound that felt louder than it should have in the quiet house. Inside were documents I hadn't touched since the months after Michael died. Police reports, insurance correspondence, legal filings, and at the bottom, his will. I spread everything out on the bed and started reading, slowly, carefully, without skipping anything this time. Back then, I was barely surviving. Michael was gone. I was pregnant, exhausted, and drowning in grief. My parents offered to help with the paperwork. Court dates, forms, signatures. They said it was too much for me to handle alone. I believed them because I wanted to. Because trusting them was easier than standing upright under the weight of everything else. Now, with a clearer head, I saw what I'd missed. The insurance payout had been processed unusually fast. My lawyer had mentioned it once, almost as an aside, years later. At the time, I'd been grateful. That money had kept the lights on. It helped me start over. I never questioned how smoothly it all went. But there it was, the second signature, not required, not standard. My father's. He hadn't just helped. He'd inserted himself, not illegally, not in a way that would have raised alarms at the time, but deliberately, quietly. Enough to give himself visibility, enough to believe he had a claim, not just to the money, but to the decisions that followed. The pieces slid together in my mind with a clarity that made my hands go cold. The way they talked about my business like it belonged to them. The way they felt entitled to updates, to influence, to opinions that were never asked for. The way they bristled every time I reminded them that I was the one building something, not them. This wasn't about Harper's phone. It never was. It was about control, about legacy, about ownership. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. She deserves to know the whole truth. I didn't answer. Instead, I took photos of the relevant documents and sent them to my lawyer with a single line. I think this goes deeper than we thought. He called me back within the hour. His tone had shifted. No longer cautious. Now it was precise. He told me to stop engaging directly, to document everything, to prepare for formal action if they continued to escalate. He said something else too, something that stuck with me. People don't threaten unless they're afraid of what you might uncover. That night, I made a decision I'd been postponing for 9 years. I sat Harper down at the kitchen table after dinner. No phones, no distractions, just the two of us. I told her the truth, not the sanitized version, not the full horror either, but the truth she deserved. I told her her dad had died before she was born. I told her he loved her, that he knew about her, that he would have been there if he could. I told her I waited to tell her because I wanted her to be old enough to ask questions without feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. She didn't cry. She listened. Then she hugged me so tightly I felt something inside my chest finally loosen. When she pulled back, she asked if we could still go on the trip I'd promised her years ago, Yellowstone. The one we always said we'd plan next year. I told her yes. We booked it that night. The next morning I called Michael's sister. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the awkward months after the funeral when everyone was trying to navigate grief without saying the wrong thing. I told her what was happening, carefully, honestly. I told her I wasn't sure if Harper was ready to meet more of Michael's family yet, but I wanted her to know the truth before someone else twisted it. She didn't push. She didn't accuse. She said she'd wait, and that she was there if Harper ever wanted to know more about her father. Before we hung up, she said something I didn't know I needed to hear. You protected her. No one gets to tell you that was wrong. 3 days later, my parents sent an email. It was different from the others. Short, controlled, no threats, no guilt. They said they understood I'd made my choice. They said they wouldn't bother me again. For the first time, I believed them. Not because they'd changed, but because they finally understood they'd lost. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't take comfort in their email. I treated it like a pause, not an ending. People who've spent years assuming access don't give it up overnight. They retreat, reassess, and look for a softer angle. I knew that if they were truly done, the noise would stop everywhere, not just in my inbox. It didn't. The next contact came through Claire, my cousin on my mom's side. She showed up at my door unannounced with a tote bag and a lemon loaf wrapped in wax paper, the kind of offering people bring when they don't want to admit they're choosing sides. I let her in because she'd been the only one who hadn't tried to bargain with me yet. She stood awkwardly in the hallway and said my mom wanted me to stop, that things had gone too far, that I was going to ruin them. She handed me a folded note from my mother and waited. I didn't take it. I asked Claire one question instead. Did they tell you what they did to Harper? Her face changed immediately. She nodded and said they told her they didn't think it would matter, that Harper should know, and that I was just delaying the inevitable. They said they were doing it for her. I felt something inside me go very still. Claire didn't defend them. She just said she was sorry and left the loaf on the porch before walking away. That was the moment I stopped hoping for restraint. I drafted a cease and desist with my lawyer that afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't accuse or threaten. It was clean, specific, and unmistakable. From that point forward, my parents were forbidden from publicly associating with me, my business, or Harper in any personal, promotional, or professional context. No interviews, no social posts, no introductions that implied ownership, legacy, or shared success. Any attempt to suggest otherwise would be treated as misrepresentation or fraud. I signed it and sent it. Then I closed the last account. Years earlier, back when my business was just an idea and I still believed support meant something simple, I'd opened a tiny account that allowed my dad viewing access only. No spending rights, no control, just visibility. I'd left it open out of habit, maybe hope, letting him watch numbers grow and imagine he was still part of it. I don't know why I hadn't closed it sooner. I closed it that afternoon and moved the funds, just under $28,000, into Harper's education account. When the confirmation email arrived, I forwarded it to my dad. No subject line, no explanation, just the notice. This account has been closed by the primary owner. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. My dad. Then again, then Dan, then my mom. None of them left voicemails, not a single one. Just rings that went unanswered, each one a small acknowledgement that they still believed I'd pick up and explain myself. I didn't. The fallout was quiet but thorough. Clients noticed the updated company bio. Partners received the restructuring note. I didn't name names, but the message was clear. This business was mine. Built by a single mother with grief, grit, and a child to protect. Not a family legacy, not a shared success. 24 hours later, a message came in that stopped me cold. It wasn't from my parents or Dan or Claire. It was from Michael's sister. She said their mother had reached out, that there was noise about Harper, and she didn't know what was true. She asked if we could talk someday, if I was open to it. No demands, no accusations, just curiosity and care. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do its work. Then I replied that I appreciated her reaching out, that Harper might need time, but that honesty mattered. She said she understood and that she'd wait. Before signing off, she said again what she'd said before. You protected her. That night, another message came in from an unknown number. One sentence. You'll regret this when she finds out what you're hiding. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I'd already chosen truth over fear, boundaries over performance, and clarity over control. And that left only one part unfinished. I didn't need to ask who sent that last message. I knew. It had the same hollow confidence as everything else they'd done, the same assumption that fear would make me fold. It didn't. It settled something in me instead. If they still thought they could reach Harper through secrets and threats, then the only way forward was to take away the shadows they were hiding in. I went back to the fireproof box one last time. I read every page again, not as a grieving widow this time, but as a mother deciding what belonged to her daughter's future. Michael's will was clear. The insurance paperwork was not. There were choices my parents made under the banner of help that had given them access they were never meant to have. Not ownership, not rights, just proximity. And proximity to people like them had always been enough to feel entitled. I called my lawyer and told him to proceed, not with a lawsuit, not with public accusations, with clarity. We documented everything, dated it, sealed it. We made it impossible for them to pretend they didn't know where the lines were anymore. Then I did the one thing they never expected. I told Harper everything. Not all at once, not with documents or timelines or accusations. I told her who her dad was. I told her how he laughed, how he held my hand when he was nervous, how excited he was when we found out about her. I told her he died before she was born, and that I waited to tell her because I wanted her to grow up feeling safe first. I told her that some people had tried to take that moment away from us, and that wasn't okay. She listened quietly, the way she always did when something mattered. When I finished, she hugged me and asked if we could still go to Yellowstone like we'd talked about for years. I said yes, and for the first time since Christmas, I meant it without hesitation. We booked the trip that night. No permission, no compromises. The next morning, I called Michael's sister back. I told her Harper knew now. I told her I didn't know when or if they'd be ready to meet, but that honesty mattered. She didn't push. She didn't ask for photos or promises. She said she'd be there when the time came. That was enough. 3 days later, my parents sent one final email. 4 lines. No guilt. No demands. They said they understood I'd made my choice. They said they wouldn't bother me again. For the first time, I believed them. Not because they'd learned empathy, but because they'd lost leverage. There was nothing left to threaten me with. No money, no access, no secrets. Life didn't explode after that. It didn't even change much on the surface. Harper went back to school. I went back to work. We planned our trip. The quiet stayed quiet. And that was the point. Sometimes there's no reconciliation, no dramatic apology, no moment where everyone sits down and admits they were wrong. Sometimes the ending is just a clean stop, a boundary so firm it finally holds. My parents don't get to tell Harper's story. They don't get to shape her grief or rewrite her past. That belongs to me, to us. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who respects your truth. And the truth is, when it mattered most, I chose my daughter over everyone else. I'd do it again without hesitation.